It wasn't supposed to end like this. Mark had been my rock, the man who stepped in when my world was falling apart. When Tyler walked out 8 years ago, leaving me alone with Mia and Ethan, I thought I'd never recover. But then Mark came into our lives. He didn't just love me, he loved them. He became the father they deserved, showing up to every recital, every soccer game, and every late-night fever. He taught Ethan how to ride a bike, and he stayed up late helping Mia with her science projects. For years, he was the glue that held us together. When the adoption became official last month, I thought we had reached a new chapter. Watching Mark sign those papers, seeing his name replace Tyler's on their birth certificates, it felt like a fresh start for all of us. "You're my dad now," Ethan had said, beaming. Mark had smiled, his voice breaking as he replied, "I always have been." And then Tyler called. I hadn't heard from him in years, not since the day he slammed the door and walked out of our lives. I should have ignored him. I should have told him to stay gone. But something about the way he sounded, so desperate, so full of regret, stopped me. "I've changed, Jenna," he said. "I want to make things right. For you. For the kids." At first, I didn't tell Mark. I told myself it was because I didn't want to stir up old wounds. But deep down, I knew it was because I wasn't ready to face my own feelings. Seeing Tyler again brought back memories I'd buried, of the man I thought he could be, the love I thought we shared before it all fell apart. When I finally told Mark, his reaction was exactly what I expected. "Why are you even talking to him?" he asked, his voice tight with hurt. "He left. He doesn't deserve a second chance." "He's their father," I argued, though even as the words left my mouth I felt a pang of guilt. Maybe he really has changed. Mark's eyes darkened. "I'm their father. Or did signing those adoption papers mean nothing?" The conversation spiraled from there. Mark couldn't understand why I'd even entertained the idea of Tyler being part of our lives again, and I couldn't explain why I felt so drawn to the possibility. A few weeks later, I made my decision. I told Mark I needed space to figure out what I wanted, but the truth was, I had already chosen. Tyler had convinced me that he deserved a second chance, and part of me believed I owed it to Mia and Ethan to let him try. When I packed my things and took the kids to stay with my sister, Mark didn't fight me. He just stood in the doorway, his face a mask of quiet devastation. "After everything I've done for you, for them, you're leaving me for him?" I didn't have an answer. All I could do was look away as the weight of my choice settled over both of us. Mark didn't call or text after I left. The silence was deafening, but I told myself it was for the best. I needed time to figure things out, and so did he. At least that's what I kept repeating to myself as I unpacked at my sister's house, trying to explain to Mia and Ethan why we weren't going home to Mark. "Are we coming back soon?" Mia had asked that first night, her voice trembling. "Mark was supposed to help me with my book report." I forced a smile, brushing her hair behind her ear. "We'll see, sweetie. For now, we're just staying here for a little while." Ethan was quieter, his big brown eyes, so much like Tyler's, watching me with a mix of confusion and hurt. He didn't ask questions, but his silence felt heavier than any words could have been. Meanwhile, Tyler seemed determined to prove he had changed. He showed up every day with gifts for the kids, took them to the park, and promised them everything from weekend camping trips to a better future. At first, it felt like the right thing to do, to give him a chance to rebuild what he had broken. But as the days passed, doubts began to creep in. Mark wasn't the kind of man to explode in anger or lash out, but when he finally showed up at my sister's house one evening, I could see the weight of his emotions in the set of his jaw and the tightness of his shoulders. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low but firm. I nodded, stepping out onto the porch while the kids played inside. The air was thick with tension as we faced each other under the fading light of the setting sun. "You've made your choice," Mark began, his tone clipped. But I need to understand why. Why would you throw away everything we've built together? Everything I've done for you and the kids, for our family. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. It's not about throwing anything away, I said defensively. It's about giving the kids a chance to know their father. Tyler deserves that chance. Mark let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. Tyler deserves it? The same man who walked out on you when Mia was a toddler and Ethan was still in diapers? The same man who couldn't even bother to send a birthday card for 8 years? And now suddenly he's Father of the Year? It's not that simple, I argued, though my voice wavered. People change, Mark. He's trying. Doesn't that count for something? What about me? Mark shot back, his voice breaking. What about everything I've done? I was there when Ethan had the flu and couldn't stop crying. I was there when Mia scraped her knee and needed someone to carry her home. I was there when he wasn't. And now, you're telling me that all of that means nothing because Tyler showed up with a few presents and a sob story? That's not what I'm saying, I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. I feel like I owe it to the kids to give him a chance. No, Mark said, his tone hardening. You don't owe him anything. What you owe is to the family we built together. The family you're tearing apart because of some fantasy about Tyler being a changed man. His words hung in the air, cutting through my defenses. This isn't a fantasy, I said weakly. But even as I spoke, doubt crept into my voice. Isn't it? Mark pressed, stepping closer. Be honest with yourself, Jenna. Is this really about the kids? Or is it about you? About some unresolved feelings you've been holding on to for a man who didn't care enough to stay? I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. Mark shook his head, his face a mixture of anger and heartbreak. You're gambling with our family, Jenna. And for what? A second chance with someone who already proved he doesn't deserve one? As he turned and walked away, I stood frozen on the porch, his words echoing in my mind. For the first time since Tyler had come back into my life, I began to question everything. Was I really doing this for Mia and Ethan? Or was I chasing something I'd convinced myself I had lost? Something that might not have been real to begin with? Mark showed up at my sister's house again a few days later, his expression heavier than I'd ever seen. His eyes, usually so kind, were shadowed with exhaustion and pain. I had just put Mia and Ethan to bed when I heard the knock, and as soon as I opened the door, I knew this conversation wouldn't end with easy answers. We need to talk, he said, his voice steady but raw. I nodded, stepping aside to let him in. The living room felt too small, too stifling for the weight of what was about to unfold. I gestured for him to sit, but he remained standing, arms crossed over his chest as he faced me. Why, Jenna? He asked, his voice breaking the silence. Why would you leave me? After everything I've done for you, for Mia, for Ethan, what more could I have done? His words were heavy, each one landing like a stone in my chest. Mark, it's not about what you've done, I began, my voice trembling. You've been amazing. You've been everything I could have asked for. Then why am I not enough? He asked, his voice rising. Why is Tyler suddenly the answer to everything? He abandoned you. He abandoned the kids. And now you're willing to throw everything away for him? It's not like that, I said, though my voice faltered under the weight of his accusation. Then tell me what it is like, Mark demanded, his eyes searching mine for answers. Help me understand why the man who didn't bother to stick around gets to swoop in and take my place. I hesitated, struggling to put my feelings into words. It's not about replacing you, I said finally. It's about giving the kids a chance to know their father. Don't you think they deserve that? They already have a father, Mark shot back, his voice cracking. Or did adopting them mean nothing to you? That's not fair, I whispered, tears spilling down my cheeks. I know what you've done for them. I know what you've done for me. And I'm so grateful for it, Mark. But Tyler, He's their biological father. Maybe he's changed. Maybe he can be better this time. Mark let out a bitter laugh, running a hand through his hair. Maybe? You're willing to gamble our entire family on a maybe? What happens when he disappoints you again, Jenna? When he walks out again? Because we both know he will. His words cut deep, but I couldn't stop myself from speaking the truth I had been avoiding. I don't know, Mark, I said, my voice shaking. I just feel like I need to give him this chance. For the kids, yes, but also for me. I need to know if there's still something there, if there's something worth saving. Mark stared at me, his face a mixture of anger, hurt, and disbelief. So this isn't just about the kids, he said quietly. It's about you. About chasing some fantasy that Tyler can magically fix what he broke. I shook my head, but even as I did, I couldn't deny the truth in his words. It's not a fantasy, I said weakly. It's unfinished. I need closure, Mark. Closure? He repeated, his voice trembling with emotion. You don't need closure, Jenna. You need to stop running from reality. Tyler doesn't deserve this chance, and you know it. And while you're chasing this closure, you're destroying everything we've built. You're hurting me. You're hurting the kids. His voice cracked on the last word, and I felt my chest tighten with guilt. I never wanted to hurt you, I said softly. I love you, Mark. I do. But this is something I need to figure out. And what about me? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. What about the kids? Do we just have to sit here and wait while you figure it out? I didn't have an answer. The silence between us grew heavy, and for the first time, I realized the full extent of the pain I had caused. Mark had given everything to me, to Mia, to Ethan, and in return, I had left him to pick up the pieces of a family I was now tearing apart. I don't know what to say, I admitted, my voice breaking. I don't know how to make this right. Mark shook his head, his expression filled with sorrow. You can't, Jenna. Not like this. He turned and walked toward the door, pausing only briefly before leaving. As the door closed behind him, I sank onto the couch, tears streaming down my face. For the first time, I began to wonder if my decision had been a mistake, one that could never be undone. After Mark walked out that night, something shifted between us. Something I feared might never be repaired. He stopped reaching out entirely, and for the first time in years, his absence felt real. It wasn't just the quiet void of someone not being there. It was the absence of his steady presence, his patience, and the love that had always felt unconditional. At first, I told myself it was for the best. Mark needed space, and I needed time to figure out if I had made the right choice. But as the days turned into weeks, I began to see the cracks forming around me, especially in Mia and Ethan. Mia, who had always been chatty and energetic, grew withdrawn. One evening, I found her curled up on her bed, clutching the stuffed bear Mark had given her when she was little. I miss him, she said softly, her voice breaking. Why can't we just go home? Ethan wasn't any better. He acted out in small ways, refusing to eat dinner, ignoring me when I tried to talk to him. But his sadness was obvious. Mark was supposed to take me to the batting cages, he said one night, pushing his plate away. Tyler doesn't even know I like baseball. Tyler, for all his promises, was trying. He showed up regularly, made big gestures like taking us to the zoo or buying toys for the kids. But beneath the surface, I started to notice the cracks in his resolve. He got frustrated easily when the kids didn't warm up to him the way he wanted. He missed a planned dinner one evening, texting me at the last minute that something had come up. The excuses sounded painfully familiar. Meanwhile, Mark stayed away. He didn't reach out to me, but I knew he hadn't completely disappeared from the kids' lives. Mia mentioned that he'd called her after school one day, just to check in, and Ethan quietly admitted that Mark had sent him a new glove for baseball. The realization hit me slowly, but deeply. Mark was still showing up, even when I had pushed him out. Tyler, on the other hand, was beginning to falter. One night, after putting the kids to bed, I sat alone in the living room, scrolling through old photos on my phone. Picture after picture of Mark with Mia and Ethan, helping them carve pumpkins, cheering them on at school events, teaching Ethan how to swing a bat. Every image was a reminder of what we had lost. For the first time, I let myself admit what I had been trying to avoid. I had made a mistake. Tyler hadn't proven he could change. I had uprooted our lives for a man who had abandoned us once before, and in doing so, I had pushed away the one person who had always been there. Mark was gone now, and as much as I wanted to believe I could fix what I'd broken, I wasn't sure he would ever let me back in. Worse, I wasn't sure I deserved him to. The weeks turned into months, and the consequences of my choices became impossible to ignore. Mark was gone, and the absence of his steady, grounding presence left a void in our lives that Tyler couldn't fill. I could see it in the kids every day. Mia was quieter than ever, retreating into herself in ways that broke my heart. Her once constant chatter about school projects and friends was now replaced with one-word answers and long hours spent alone in her room. I found her staring at old family photos one evening, tears silently streaming down her cheeks. "Why doesn't Mark come over anymore?" she whispered, clutching a picture of him holding her when she was younger. I didn't know how to answer. "He just needs some time," I said weakly, though we both knew it wasn't the truth. Ethan, on the other hand, wore his pain on his sleeve. He acted out constantly, refusing to do his homework, throwing tantrums over the smallest things. One night, after a particularly rough outburst, he yelled at me. "You ruined everything. Mark was my dad, and now he's gone because of you." His words cut deeper than anything I had felt before. He was right. I had destroyed the one thing that had given them stability and love, all for a man who had barely been part of their lives before. Tyler, for his part, was trying, but his efforts felt shallow. He was quick to get frustrated with the kids when they didn't immediately embrace him. His promises to be there often fell through, and I began to notice the old patterns resurfacing, the excuses, the unreliability, the selfishness masked as charm. Meanwhile, Mark was moving on. I heard from mutual friends that he had thrown himself into work and had started volunteering at a local youth program. They said he seemed lighter, freer, as though letting go of me had allowed him to rediscover himself. It hurt to know he was thriving without us, but it wasn't surprising. Mark had always been the stronger one, the one who could weather any storm. He had given everything to me and the kids, and I had taken it all for granted. One evening, I sat in the quiet of the house, surrounded by the mess Tyler had left behind after another canceled dinner with the kids. I stared at the empty space where Mark used to sit, his absence more tangible than ever. For the first time, I allowed myself to fully face the truth. I had made the wrong choice. I had chased a fantasy of redemption and passion, but in doing so, I had thrown away the loyalty, commitment, and quiet, unwavering love that Mark had given me and the kids. The children, caught in the chaos of my decisions, were paying the price. Mia missed her stability, her anchor in Mark. Ethan had lost the only father he had ever truly known. And I had lost the man who had loved me through everything, my mistakes, my insecurities, and my broken past. I tried reaching out to Mark once, sending a long message apologizing for everything I had done and asking if we could talk. His response was polite, but distant. "I appreciate your apology, Jenna, but I've moved on. I hope you and the kids find peace." His words were final, and I knew then that I would never get him back. Love isn't just about passion or second chances. It's about the sacrifices we make to protect those we care about most. I hadn't made those sacrifices for Mark, and now I was left to live with the consequences. As I tucked Mia and Ethan into bed that night, their faces filled with the quiet sadness they carried every day, I realized that my only choice now was to rebuild what I could. For them. I couldn't undo the past, but I could try to give them the stability and love they deserved moving forward. And as much as it hurt, I knew one thing for sure. I would never let them down again.